All right, very good.
Whenever you're ready.
All right, ready?
Yep.
All right.
1, 2, 3. Welcome back. That was really good.
Thanks. I was so good that my watch popped off.
Man,
Look at that.
this is awesome. My name is Wong Lam. Today's podcast is brought to you by Freedom, the undefeated American dream, and the 2-time state representative.
Yes.
And also the youngest chief in all the United States of the Sac and Fox Nation, Chief Wood. Welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate you, sir.
Absolutely.
So I was the youngest chief.
You were? Okay, you were.
For the first year plus I was in office. And then one of my friends, Darrell Cooper III, was elected chief or chairman of the Apache tribe.
Oh.
So he's now the youngest, but that's all right.
The second youngest
there you go.
chief in the United States of America.
Yeah.
How's your day?
Today's going really well.
Yeah.
Work is crazy right now, but it's okay. I mean, it's a day-by-day process.
Yeah.
But it's good.
That's awesome. Yeah. Family? Kids?
Doing really well. How about you?
Man, fantastic. My wife is working from home. I get to drive her new Jeep. Enjoying the freedoms.
Was that your Jeep with the American flag?
Oh, yeah. Come on now. That's a freedom rig.
I love it. I love it. That's great.
Yeah. Do you remember how we actually really started communicating?
Twitter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I commented on, was it Matt Pinnell's tweet? Or did he comment on my?
I think he commented,
He commented on my tweet.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. So, yeah, on Twitter. Then we got together at camps.
Yeah.
And had some coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Twitter's a good thing.
Twitter is a good thing.
It's also a terrible thing.
It can be a terrible thing.
So
absolutely.
There's the good and the bad that comes with it. But I think I've made a lot of friends.
Yeah.
On Twitter.
So you met some
really cool people on Twitter.
Yeah.
Made some really cool connections on Twitter. More so maybe than any other social media platform.
Right.
For whatever reason.
That's interesting.
I think it's got some issues right now that concern me. But I think overall it might be the most effective platform. Especially to have dialogue.
Yeah.
But I mean, you take the good with the bad. The bad with the good, I guess you should say.
Yeah, you have to.
Taking the good with the bad.
I'll take the good with the good.
Yeah, that's even better. That's what I desire.
I like it. Yeah. You're on Twitter, and I see this tweet come across. I'm just going to ask you.
Okay.
Do you feel like you're the same person in real life as you are on Twitter?
Oh, gosh. I hope I'm a much better person than I am in either places usually. So I would say that I've never been different on social media than I am in real life.
Right on.
I think there have been times where I think everybody is emboldened by the ability to type something and drop it and then walk away.
Yeah.
And then see what kind of explosion happens afterwards. I don't ever want to be that way. So I find myself oftentimes, I may be less real on social media than maybe my feelings are, like my emotions.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I have some time to think about it first. But I think mostly I'm the exact same person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like for me the same way. I tend to hold back as far as getting so emotionally charged and vent to the world.
Not everybody does that.
Right. And I'd rather just confide with my wife, talk to my close friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe shoot you a text and say, hey, what do you think about this?
That's a great way to do it.
And then off we go.
That's right.
Because the world doesn't need to hear about Wong Lam and how ticked off he is about everyone.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay to have a constructive conversation.
But that's the key phrase, constructive conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah. Before we get deeper, man, we got a swag bag. It's a rice bag.
I love that.
There's no rice in it.
No rice.
But we do have some gifts for you. Awesome. Your dad's a police officer.
He is 34 years, nearly 35.
Please thank him from us. And please have
he'll love it. He wore he has a hat with the American flag on the front with the blue strip on it.
Oh man.
Not exactly. He's gonna love this. He's gonna love it. That's awesome.
And this is yours.
Oh, very good. Love it.
Yes, sir. And these are both for you. Sorry about it. You just have to...
Don't worry about it. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I'll put it right here next to my phones.
So you don't forget them. Yeah. So you're the 2-time state representative, back-to-back champion, undefeated.
I am undefeated there. Yes. In fact, I'm undefeated in political races.
That's amazing.
More importantly, I'm undefeated in political races that I voted in this year. That's more important to me now than my past political success. I don't always win races I vote in. Sometimes I vote for people that don't win.
Yeah.
And I don't always vote for people that I think are going to win. You know, I think it's important to vote for the right person.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not I think they can win.
For sure.
It's painful sometimes because I usually get emotionally invested in their races, and so it's I'm very passionate about politics.
Yeah.
And the role it has, the impact it has in our everyday lives. Most people don't think about that, and they're probably happier people. But I think whether it's school board or all the way to President of the United States, your vote is so important. To vote for the person that you most, identify with and think will do the best for what you're voting for. But.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love politics. I love history, and I try to have constructive conversations. Sometimes I get passionate, but they're never like, "Dude, it's my way," or it's never like that. I will say though, sometimes I feel like a lot of my friends that I converse with focus too much on the very top, when we should be focusing on the state, because that affects you.
Right.
I mean,
the closer to you, the more important it is. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
However, it's you don't see that sometimes. You don't see the impact that your vote for school board actually has, especially if your kids are out of school. You're not paying attention as much as you used to, just what the schools are doing around you. Or if you don't send your kids to public school, but you still have the opportunity, if you live in that area, to vote on school board. I just think those are some of the most important races to focus in on, the city council races, and those are usually people you should have a better opportunity to know,
right? Because
of their the accessibility.
Yeah.
But I think the education of our children when it comes to civics and government is not where it should be, and actually I start a week from Monday teaching a homeschool civics class about elections. And
wow.
So I'm going to take them from I think that's the 14th, whatever the date of that Monday is, all the way through the presidential election. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. But so it's that important to me. I like to be involved in it.
That's awesome.
And I don't have any kids that are 7th and 8th grade, but it's a 7th and 8th grade government civics class.
Yeah. What? Can I watch this too?
I will. I'll see if I can send some to you.
Well, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I can have it on one screen while I'm working.
There you go.
That's Chief. I recognize the voice, recognize the hair. I don't recognize the boots.
You probably won't see the boots in there.
Yeah,
but
those are nice.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. They're from Goodwill.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah,
I like
Goodwill fan.
So, without revealing your age, unless you want to, you've been in politics for the last 5-6 years. Walk us through what's your mindset like? What got you really involved?
Sure. So I'm 30.
Okay.
Right. So I've really been in politics for 12 years. So I was 18 when I decided I was going to run for my House seat that I ended up winning, Shawnee. So it's House District 26, and my predecessor was the Speaker of the House, Chris Steele. And I read in the newspaper one morning that he was terming out, and I was like, wow, if I'm going to run for this seat, I'm either going to do it now. I'm probably going to have to wait 12 years, because most people, if they're fortunate enough and do well enough, will get reelected. The majority of people are getting reelected year after year, which, the good ones, that's great. The ones that don't do so good, hopefully their constituents are paying attention. But and so I had not quite gotten married yet at that point. Olivia and I were engaged, and the year before that, really the summer before that winter, the summer of 2008, I had a page for Chris Steele at the Capitol. And so that was my first time even being to the Capitol since I'd been a kid. So I was a senior in high school, and I was paging for Chris, and I remember I was just kind of walking around the Capitol, and I was bored. Paging's not a lot of fun.
It's like a messenger?
Unless you're into politics.
Right.
At that point I wasn't. And I was bored, and so I'm walking down on the second floor, and there's this set of doors. They're just big. It looked big to this 18-year-old kid. And I open the doors up, and there's nobody down this hallway.
Yeah.
And it's there on that west wing of the Capitol, and it's where the old Supreme Court offices were before they moved it across the street. And I'm walking down the hallway, and there's a door that's open. I go sit down, and I'm sitting in there hanging out. Finally, I think maybe I should go back upstairs. Anyway, 4 years later, I'm in that office. That's actually the office I ended up in at the Capitol. And so I tell a lot of people that story, and it's, to me, my political journey just started with me wanting to make a difference. My dad's a police officer, like we've already established. My mom's a teacher, and I really wanted to be a police officer. And my dad spent years talking me out of that. He wanted me to do something that was safer and was less political, right? He wanted me to make more money, ultimately. And so he didn't want me to be a police officer, talked me out of it, so I went to school to be a teacher. I was never destined to make any money. But service was it was something that it was ingrained into me by my parents. And watching my dad work, he was the resource officer at Shawnee High School for 18 years, and watching him work with students and get to know students and their families and making a difference in their lives my entire life. Like my entire life, he was at Shawnee High School. And my brother graduated from Shawnee High School a couple years after me. And now my dad is the resource officer at North Rock Creek, where my kids go to school.
Wow, that's cool.
It's pretty neat for them to get to experience their grandpa or they call him Papa Freeland.
Yeah.
And they get to experience watching him work with students and be involved in their lives and showing them, this is who a police officer really is. And I think if you were to talk to any kids that were at Shawnee High School during those 18 years, there may be a few that made bad decisions, and they may not like him for those reasons. But I mean, if I tell you what, if the majority of the kids hadn't liked my dad, there's no way I would have been elected to office. And so, anyway, I wanted to be in public service, and it just so happened that I was old enough at the right time to run for office, and reading the newspaper one morning and told the woman I was going to marry that I'm going to run for office one day probably, and this might be our chance, and it just sort of kind of fell together. But so did 2 terms, 2012 to 2016, and decided not to run again. We had just had my 3rd child, Finley, in February of that year, and it just seemed like a lot was going on, and my priorities weren't right where they needed to be, I felt, and so I wanted to be closer to home all the time, and fortunately I was just driving from Shawnee to Oklahoma City, so that's not too bad of a drive,
right?
But just, you're never off work. You're always on. You go to Walmart, you got to be on. I mean, and it's and that was just something that it just on 2 years, in 2 terms it had worn on me. In 4 years it had worn on me. So decided not to run again. And that, to me, I thought that was probably the end of it for me. I really did. I thought that was probably the end of politics for me. And I went to work for Big Brothers Big Sisters during my 2nd term in Shawnee, and they invited me to take over the Tulsa office, and so we moved our family to Tulsa, and for about a year I drove back and forth for 3 months, and then we moved to Tulsa for 8 months, and then we found out we're having our 4th kid.
Oh my goodness!
All the families back in Shawnee. So that's where we went back to, and ended up getting a government relations job with the American Cancer Society, and that's how I ended up back at the Capitol. And so I was basically lobbying, but it was still in that nonprofit sector that I really enjoy and appreciate. And man, it's crazy.
How's campaigning though? Like, did you have any? You didn't have any experience prior, right?
None, really. Very little. I mean, the extent of my campaigning was, I think I put some signs out for Shane Jett whenever he was running for Congress the year before I decided to run for office, and so it's that was it. I mean,
you knock on doors?
I had not done any of that at that point, and so it was a crazy awakening to what people go through to run for office. Because I'm 20. I was not even 21 yet when I started knocking doors, and you have to be 21 to be a House member.
Wow.
And so that was, to me, it was just everyone just looked at me as a kid, I'm sure, as I'm knocking on these doors, because I don't quite look 30 now, I don't think.
No.
And so, at 21, I looked like I may have been 14 or 15 probably to some people. My beard wasn't nearly as thick as it is now. a little spotty at times, and so it was weird, a weird experience, but it was a good experience. I mean, great reception at the doors when we knocked a ton of doors. I was working full time and going to school full time when I started, and my dad was working he had just left the high school and would knock doors for me during the day because he was working midnight. So he'd get off at 7 in the morning and go home and eat some breakfast, maybe take a nap, and then go knock doors from 9 until I got off work.
Wow.
I'd tap out with him. He'd go home and sleep. We knocked every door, every registered voter in the district, and my dad felt so bad to skip a house that if he saw someone outside, he'd hand it to them. They probably weren't even a registered voter, but he'd still hand them a pamphlet, and I had to remind him those cost money. But my dad is just really, he really is both my parents really good people.
That's awesome.
And love people.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important quality. But yeah, no, that was a rude awakening, learning how to campaign. And I did it without a consultant. So we had no consultant. And my opponent had a consultant. He raised $45,000, $50,000. I raised $4,000. Like it was we had no business winning that race, and we just worked like we were going to.
Yeah,
we did. So it worked out. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Take me back, or take everyone back to the first time you went up to knock on someone's door. Your very first time.
I remember the door, and the lady's last name I still couldn't pronounce to this day. It was I think it was probably Czechoslovakian last name, if I remember correctly, and couldn't pronounce it. And I get to the doorstep, and her husband had just passed away, like just a few months before. And so both their names were on the list because they hadn't been cleaned at that point. And so I knocked that door, and I don't even remember what I said, but she became my first supporter.
Really?
I knocked it so early, and my opponent hadn't even probably started knocking doors yet, and I remember I just told her who I was. I'm Justin Wood, and I'm running to be your state representative. And if you have any questions for me, I'll sit here and answer all of them. And she, I don't think she asked a single question, but she told me that she wasn't really interested in politics, but her husband always was. And so we talked about that for a minute. And I remember I probably knocked her door 3 times, because I think we knocked everyone's door, I think 3 times at least.
That's cool.
In that primary. And after that, we slowed down a little bit after we got through the primary. But yeah, it was quite the experience. But just getting to know people,
right,
and what they care about.
Yeah.
And if there's someone who's involved in the community, they always have a little bit more to say.
Yeah.
But my favorite conversations were with people who didn't get a lot of visitors, and they just wanted to talk. And I loved that, because it was a lot more about them and less about me.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's, to me, I'd much rather talk about you than talk about myself. But
yeah.
But no, yeah, it's knocking doors. It's a whole. If you don't like to knock doors, politics should not be for you.
Yeah.
It's really where you get to know the people.
Yeah.
And anybody can knock doors. You just have to be willing to answer hard questions and be okay if one slams in your face. And usually it's not you they're rejecting. They're usually rejecting the party you're affiliated with.
Oh,
when
I got
door
you.
slams in your face. Unless you really tick some people off. But,
right.
Yeah.
What are a couple things you've learned from your first campaign, because you didn't have a consulting?
Right. So don't be afraid to ask for money. That was one thing. I think I had a fear of fundraising, or I think we would have raised more money, because we had a great network of friends and family, and I think we would have raised more money had I been less fearful to call and ask for money. And I said, a lot of people are willing to invest in you. There really are a ton of people that are willing to invest in you, and you just have to be willing to ask the question. Would you? You say you're my friend, or you know what, we believe in the same thing. Would you be willing to invest in that belief? And so, I think I learned to not be afraid to ask, and I'm not afraid anymore.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think listening. I learned a lot about listening.
Yeah.
And I like to talk, as you're hearing right now, but I'm learning through marriage, through being a father, how important. And then through campaigning, how important it is really and being an elected official, listening to someone is much more important than anything that I can give them. If I come in wanting to solve their problem and not willing to listen to what's going on, then I may miss something else that needs help. And and I might have the ability to serve them, but if I don't listen,
Right.
then that goes for whether it's being chief or state representative or being a husband or father, how important it is to sit there and listen to what the needs actually are before I go in and try to prescribe a solution.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Obviously, you're only 30.
Yeah.
Do you have any defining moments you'd like to share with our listeners?
Sure. So, I was thinking about this, of course, because defining moments.
Yeah.
So, I probably have more than one. I think probably my defining moment that probably hadn't quite settled. Maybe it still hasn't settled itself. But my wife and I met in you probably have to edit that cough out.
Okay.
That's probably right in the mic. It's gonna deafen someone who's listening. So my wife and I met on Wednesday night youth group at church, where we still go today. So my wife's gone there for 30 years. I've been since her birth, and I've been going there for 14 years in January. And I met Ben is his name, and he's my youth pastor. He was our youth pastor. And so I think maybe my defining moment was when he and his wife they decided they were going to do mission work. They were called to mission work. And I remember we went out to her parents' house, to his wife's parents, Kendra's parents' house, and we were saying goodbye. I mean, so this was a process. They go through the whole process of learning about where they're going to go and all these types of things. And when the day they left, I just remember how much it hurt. And I remember holding my friend Ben and just giving him a hug and just bawling like a child, because this man had discipled me. He had taught me what it was like to be a follower of Christ, and it had only been for a few years, because I didn't meet him until I was 17, 16. I think I just turned 17 actually when I met him. And so, I remember just like wiping my face on his shoulder, and as we're leaving the house, and they're about to leave the next day to finish up their training, and I remember just thinking I'd lost that mentor, and I think that was hard for me. And I think it's starting to come full circle. I got to spend some time with him recently and visit with him about how I just never found that person to replace him. Never found that person who would be who would disciple me and be my mentor, and never replaced it. Certain people have probably filled that role in a secular sense, but I'd never really found that person in my faith to be my mentor and disciple me, and I think I still probably search for that to this day. So that's why I don't think it's over yet. But that moment of like realizing I was losing that person, it was hard. And so anyway, I mean, I think that thinking about it, I think that was that moment of just losing that person that really defined. And I think at that point, I think I was 19 at that point, 18 or 19. And so I probably only known him for 2 years at that point. But just that feeling of loss and not knowing where to go. And I think a lot of my marriage and my decision-making process could have been aided by having someone like that still there. Yeah. And so, I mean, we've survived all the hard stuff. Yeah. God's good, but I think that loss has defined a lot of who I am. Right. Which is why I was sitting there thinking about it. I mean, it's important to think about defining moments. Yeah. Because I hadn't really even thought about that as being one, but that was the one that stuck in my head as I'm going through trying to find one. And there's a lot of times in my life that I think, I mean, whether it's election day or sitting next to a relative as they're about to pass away, or having these really intimate conversations that define who you are. I think everyone probably has multiple moments, but that one to me sticks out as one that still hasn't been. There maybe hasn't been resolution to it, and we'll see. And we'll see as I continue to grow, and as I look for that person, or as that person finds me, or as I start discipling other people, as I go through that process, which I have done. But there's that need for someone there to be your mentor, to be that person that looks after you, teaches you about, and for me, teaches me about my faith and how to react in certain situations. and for that to have been lacking, and for me still to go through some of the things I've gone through in leadership positions, and there's been a lot of men who've stepped up in my life, my dad and Freeland and my grandfather Clint, and that have stepped up into that role, but maybe not in that faith role. And so that, to me, I'm probably still searching for that, but also doing my best to do it well for other people while I search for it myself. And so that, to me, is defining.
Have you say you spoke to him recently?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever let him know?
Oh, absolutely, I told him. I said it's crazy that we, because I was, in fact, you and I talked that day on my way home from visiting with him.
Oh, okay.
So, we talked about it, and it's not their fault. They were going to do what they were supposed to do, and really, I should have. I mean, I was a kid. I was a young adult. Should have been more proactive in finding it, like in looking for it, and maybe it wasn't supposed to be to go that way for me. Maybe I was supposed to have multiple men pour into me and be a part of who I am and what what my journey looks like. But we talked about it, and it was a good conversation, and I don't know that he realized that, but so he has a Bible that he gave me before he left, and it was one that I think it's what he taught out of whenever we were in youth group, and it's been in every office I've been in, from the Capitol to where I am to the Capitol complex that we have at the Sac and Fox Nation. And so it just sits there on my any table that I have, and sometimes I use that to read from. I have another Bible that I usually study out of, but it sits there, and it just reminds me, like, I'm accountable to more than just myself. I'm accountable to men, and most importantly, I'm accountable to God. And so I think that so his influence on me, his name's Ben, just was profound, and really don't think about those things until you sit down and force yourself to think about your defining moment.
Yeah, that's true, man. So aside from your father and Ben, what are maybe one or two more mentors that you learned from?
Sure. So my grandfather Clint is actually my wife's grandfather, and so he's actually, when I decided to run for office, I actually didn't decide until after he was like, "You're going to do it. You're going to go run for office." And he went into his bedroom, got his checkbook out, wrote me my first check, and for my campaign, and he believed in me. And I think I was probably 19 when I decided I was going to run.
Yeah.
So it was a solid 2-year campaign.
Yeah.
Like it was way longer than it needed to be, and he drove. His name's Clint, and he drove me door knocking. He sat there with me when I thought that, why am I doing this? Like, why am I putting myself and my family through this race for office that there's no way I'm going to win? And so he has cancer, and we're walking through that together right now. And so about 2 or 3 times a week, I get to sit with him and spend time with either before work or after work, and kind of reflect on some of these things, and pray together, and talk about the important things in life, and that's so Clint, my dad for sure, and then Ben probably. There's a lot of people at the Capitol. Earl Sears was a state representative for 12 years, for 6 terms, fulfilled his term limits, and had a big influence on the way I look at leadership. He's from Bartlesville. And Dennis Casey was one of those men. Representative Casey was one of those men for me that really had a huge impact on the way I look at what public service looks like.
Yeah.
If you're going to be an elected official, this is the way you should look. And this is the way you should act. This is the way you should treat people. And those two men for sure, Dennis Casey and Earl Sears, had a huge impact on me when it came to what a public servant should look like. And because I was a kid.
Yeah.
And they were, I was 21 when I took office, and they were in their 50s or 60s when they took office, probably their 60s when they took office. Both retired educators, and but it was important to have those type of men around.
Absolutely,
for sure. So,
when you look back at where they're telling you this is what it should look like to your true authentic person, do you feel like it's been pretty much congruent as far as?
Well, I think so. I mean, I don't serve people for myself or any of my own gain, and that's something that, as I was evaluating why I should or should not run again back in 2016. So it was March 2016 when filing happens, and I just didn't file for office. And what are the pros on filing again, and what are the cons? And And to me, I felt like the only reason I would have ran again was because it was for me. Like if I was going to run again, it was going to be because I didn't want to look like a quitter, or I didn't want to give up the authority that I had, or I mean, and then there were some positives, of course. Like I still love serving people.
Yeah.
But the other cons, of course, were, less time with my family, and we just had our third kid, and I remember coming home every day at lunch to hold my oldest because I worked right down the street, and then with my second child, with Everett, I don't remember, a handful of times that I got to do that type of thing with him the first couple of years that he was alive. His first 4 years, really, because he was born my first year in office. And so I didn't want that to happen again with my third kid, with Finley. And so so when she was born, that's really probably when the wheels started turning. Like maybe it's time to, and at that point it had been, through almost 4 years of being in office, and I enjoyed it. But the reasons for running again were outweighed by the reasons not to run. And to me, I didn't want to do it just so people would look at me and say, well, he served his 6 terms. Like that's a big deal. People think of that. It really is some people run for that last term, even though they're miserable, because they don't want to look like someone that didn't fulfill their term limits. And to me, it was just more important to be at home and serving my family in a better way, and it just outweighed it.
Yeah.
But no, they taught me a lot of things about how important it is to put people above party.
Yeah.
And so to me, when I ran as a Republican, I don't agree with everything on the platform, but I definitely agree with more of it than I did on the other side. And so, but I was always pro public education, and I got beat up on that a lot. But what they taught me was, if you truly believe you're helping the most people, then you vote that way. You're always help the most people as you can. And every vote has an impact on people, whether it's about car tags or it's about teacher pay increase.
Yeah.
It's every single vote has to do with people. And I took some tough votes that my party didn't like, but it was important for me to take those votes.
Yeah.
Because I felt like it best represented the 38,000 people that called me their state representative. And I think, looking back on it, there's not a single vote I regret. There's a few votes that I could look at and I could have gone either way on, but there's not a single one that I regret.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that would have been the case if I'd served full 12 years. There's no telling. But
Right.
I'm really, really happy with where I left it.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you have a 3-year span from being in state to now the second youngest chief in the United States. However, you are the chief of the Sac and Fox Nation.
That's right.
How did this all play into politics, leaving politics into this role?
So I figured I was done. Just really enjoyed not being in politics.
Yeah.
Not because I don't enjoy helping people, or it's just you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah.
And if I have a fault, if I have a worst fault, it would be that I can't stand it when people are upset with me. Like I'll do anything I possibly can to make you happy.
Yeah.
And I'm learning how to deal with that. but that was probably something where every single vote ticked off somebody. Like there was no way to take a vote without making someone upset.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get past that. And my last election, I won with 74% of the vote. And I was ticked I couldn't get the other 18%. 28%. Sorry. I just did math poorly. 26%. I got 74%. 74%.
Yeah.
26%. I was upset I couldn't get the other 26%. Math, I was not good at. And so
I'll do an independence there for whatever.
So math I was not good at. But no, I was upset I couldn't get the rest of the people to vote for me. I was like, what did I do so wrong that they wouldn't vote for me?
Yeah. And
it was a silly thing to be upset about. And so anyway, I was I always felt like I needed to be a people pleaser, and that's not really what I should be doing. But serving people is important, and so I missed that a lot. And so when the opportunity came to serve people again in this way, it was just we prayed about it for a while and talked to family about it, and it just seemed like, why not take the chance? If I can glorify God and help people, then I need to do it. And so we did it, and we put our effort into it, and we ended up winning a four-way race outright without having to go to a runoff, and so I got 50 plus 1% of the vote and didn't have to worry about that second race, and which was really a blessing, because that was it was really 2 months. It was like we decided the last day of filing that I was going to file to be chief, and it was it was a marathon 2 months.
Yeah.
And I was worn out by the time that it was over, and it was really a blessing not to have to go through it again, not to have to go through another election. And so but I think the experience has been better. Not that the House was a bad experience, but I think this experience has been better because just like the role was just different.
Yeah.
It's more administrative than it is political, and in the House it's always political. Every day is politics. You got caucus politics, you've got committee politics, you've got floor politics, you've got politics outside the Capitol politics.
Wow.
When in this, it just you go do your job every day. You try to make sure you're helping people and taking care of tribal members and helping the communities out around you. And to me, it's only been a little bit over a year, but it's been rewarding.
Yeah.
And the fact that I know when I go to work that I'm going to be able to help people.
That's awesome.
And getting yelled at is not nearly as bad. I get yelled at sometimes. I can't make everybody happy, but it's not nearly as bad as getting yelled at for making the vote that ticks somebody off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
Is there, and if I misspeak, please correct me, Chief, is there an incumbent of the chief?
Yeah, so there was an incumbent chief
and
who ran again for re-election, and the second chief also ran. And so we have a 5-member business committee: a chief, second chief, treasurer, secretary, and committee member.
Okay.
And so the incumbent chief and the second chief both ran for chief again. So it was me versus 2 incumbents, basically, and then there was a 4th person that ran. And so that was difficult because I'm a young guy still, running against 2 people with some experience, and so that was an uphill battle. But we knocked doors, we did a lot of mail, which had not really been done before in races for the Sac and Fox Nation anyway. And we did phone calls. I mean, we did everything like a modern campaign would see, just to introduce myself, because that was one thing where I was probably lacking. If I was lacking anything, if it wasn't in age, it was just in people didn't know me very well.
Yeah.
Tribal members didn't know me very well. Now, a lot of them had the opportunity to vote for me for State House because Shawnee has a high population of Sac and Fox tribal members. And so they knew my name. And my dad's really well respected. And so that, of course, just introducing myself. And really, you introduce yourself by who your father is and your grandfather, your aunts, your uncles, grandparents. And so my family has done a really good job of keeping their integrity and representing themselves well, and so that helped, of course. But it was an uphill battle. But I took on the incumbent and the second chief, and it was difficult, but it was good. I mean, I'm really good friends with the second chief that was there.
Yeah.
So she didn't she ran for the chief, so she gave up her other spot, and so she's no longer second chief. But we have a good relationship and have been able to work together and on a lot of issues. And she actually works for the tribe now, and so we were able to work together on things, and that worked out really well. I don't see the former chief very much, but but I would say that we probably still have a friendship as well too.
Yeah. Do you have a watch party?
So
no,
we didn't. I was so tired. I went and voted, and then Olivia took me, and she's not a tribe member, so she couldn't vote for me. But she took me up to Oklahoma City, and we went and had lunch together. And this is pre-pandemic, of course,
Yeah, for sure.
And so it was over a year ago, and so we went up and had some chips and salsa together, and there was a downpour, and so we just kind of drove slow down I-40 back home and went and waited it out. Actually fell asleep before the results came back. Results came back about 1 a.m, and so I woke up just in time to just by God's providence, woke up just right before they announced it and saw that I'd won it without having to go to. So I won it by, I think I got 13 votes more than I needed to get out
outright,
to win it outright, which is perfect. Like it was I mean, all I needed was one more, and so it worked out really well. And it probably surprised some people, but I know it surprised some people outside of the tribe for sure.
Yeah.
But it was, to me, I think, just kind of after it was over, gathering everybody together and creating a team and knowing that moving forward we're going to work together.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality I've tried to take everywhere. Was, we may not all get what we want, but let's work together and move forward.
Yeah.
So,
what does leadership mean to you, and how does it feel?
So leadership is about communication, and about your ability to communicate your vision that you want to follow or to pursue with the people around you. And you have to be able to communicate that in a way that they both trust you and agree.
Yeah.
If they don't agree with you, maybe they at least trust you, right? Yeah. And so it's about your ability to communicate your vision and then bring people with you. And so building that trust through the way you communicate and being transparent, those are important aspects of leadership. But I watched my dad do it as a police officer, and the way he communicated with people was a really probably defines the way I communicate with people.
Yeah.
And they're important. You are important to me, and so because of that, I'm going to listen to you. And maybe you've done something wrong. Like I watched him when he would deal with people, and I watched him. As a kid, we would go to the movies all the time, and I watched my dad one day. We're at the movie theater, and I watched my dad go up to the register to go get some popcorn and a Coke, and I saw this really big guy come up to my dad, and my dad kind of looked at my mom and my brother and me and said, just kind of going. He's like kind of scooted us in.
Yeah.
And so I kind of watched out the corner of my eye what was going on outside the door as he was talking to this guy. And this guy gave him a hug, and I went to the counter and bought my dad's popcorn and his drinks. And I said, that's strange. Like, why would he not want us around that person?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was someone my dad had put in jail.
Oh.
He'd arrested this man, and he spent some time in prison. But the way my dad approached arresting him and approached, I'm assuming afterwards as well, impacted that man. And he was thanking my dad for, intervening in his life in such a way that, and that's really why I wanted to be a police officer. And my dad talked me out of it, but it's not. And I can see why he talked me out of it now. Thankful for that. But it's just that type of leadership where you're servant-minded, and really, it's the Bible teaches me about leading as well. Leading from the bottom, and serving and doing what I can to work with the people I'm leading. And I don't ever want to be the guy that sits in my office and watches other people work. I can't stand that.
Yeah.
I've had bosses like that. And to me, if my hands aren't dirty, then I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I should always be getting dirty, getting sweaty, or stamping envelopes, or whatever it happens to be that we're doing as a team. I want to be a part of that. And that's not to pat myself on the back, but that's just to show everybody that, I believe in what we're doing.
Right.
So much so that I'm involved in it.
Yeah.
And it's not just something that I want you to do so you can go get a paycheck. This is something that's important to our people, or whatever it happens to be that you're doing. It's an important part of society, doing this simple project.
Yeah.
And so when I'm able to, I get involved in that. And I think, but just watching my dad lead that way was important for me. And I think probably helped define the way I look at leadership.
Yeah.
But communication is just so important. And if you don't have it, it doesn't matter how good of a person you are, or how great your idea is, or how good looking you are. If you can't communicate, throw it out. And there's no reason. There's no reason to try to be a leader if you're unable to communicate.
Yeah.
But
do you try to, as a leader, when someone doesn't agree with you, how do you try to maybe not necessarily change their mindset, because it's hard to change someone's mindset, but how do you get them to say, hey man, actually maybe let me look at it your way? Sure.
So for me, if someone brings a different idea to me, I first have to consider maybe their idea is better. That's the first consideration I give it. Is their idea better than the idea I had? And I gauge that against many different things. Like, is it a rational idea? Is it going to help people? Is it going to make our life harder? Is it going to make our life easier?
Yeah.
Like those are all things I kind of measure it against that first. Is it ethical? Like you have to gauge these things on depending on what the question is or what the idea is,
Right.
and can we get people bought in? Like maybe it's an idea we can do along with it. I mean, and so my goal is never to. If I have an idea, my goal isn't to beat you over the head with it and say this is what we're going to do. Right. Some leaders lead that way, and sometimes it works. I don't think it's as effective long term.
Right.
It definitely doesn't win you friends.
Yeah.
So it's to me, it's always about me first looking and saying maybe I'm not right. Maybe there is a better idea than what my idea is.
Yeah.
And usually though, it is the case that we can do both things.
Yeah.
Or their idea is better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
makes sense.
It's very rarely is it we just skip my thing, we do my thing and forget about theirs. Usually it's either their idea is better or we can do both.
Yeah.
I mean it's, and I try to be realistic because I am 30. Mm-hmm. Most of the people I work with are older than me.
Right.
They have more wisdom. They've lived life longer.
Yeah.
They know more about my people. Like in today's world that I'm living in, I mean, it's in my tribal government life I'm in now. Almost everyone's older than me.
Yeah.
And our elders' ideas are important to me, and their wisdom's important to me, and our veterans and listening to them and gathering that insight.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a veteran and we have an elder. We have 2 elders on our business committee right now, and listening to them and their ideas and their experiences is important. Yeah. And so oftentimes I listen, and I'm trying to get better at it.
Yeah.
And I know one of my really good friends, he wrote a book called Weeding in Patience, and he's one of the elders at our church, and we talk about what patience really is. And patience isn't me sitting here talking to you, waiting for my turn to talk.
Right.
Patience is me sitting here listening to you and learning from God about what it is that I need to learn, because I haven't learned enough, and God's trying to teach me something through my impatience. Mm-hmm. And sitting here talking to you, I wish he'd stop talking so that I could say what I want to say. And I know for a fact I may have done that today already once. But that's not the point of being long-suffering. The point of being long-suffering is learning. Yeah. And there's so much we can learn in this life from other people if we just sit down and be quiet and let God teach us. And but yeah, it's
I like it.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah. Actually, it's really, really good. Yeah. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but we didn't get in depth. The question is, how do you deal with negativity? Because we talked about Twitter, and you take the good with the bad, vice versa. But how does the chief deal with negativity?
So, honesty. So, if it's something I've done, and I've caused someone to be upset, first of all, I apologize. Even if it may not be something that was like a wrong thing to do, right? Maybe it wasn't illegal. Maybe it wasn't hurtful. But it made that person feel bad. And it made them angry. So I apologize for my role in that. And I'm never afraid to say I'm sorry, ever. I'm sure there's people out there that are waiting for me to apologize to them from earlier time in my life that I wish I could think of you and apologize to you right now. But in this point in my life, I don't ever let a day go by that if I screw up, I don't go tell you I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And even if we're going to disagree, like maybe it's something politically that you don't like that I did, I'll still say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I hurt you. I didn't mean to. It's not my intention. I disagree with you here, but I'm still sorry that it hurt you.
Right.
And so social media can be that way sometimes. It's a little bit harder to have those conversations. It's a good place to flesh out differences, but it's not the best place to probably fix a difference that you have, or fix a relationship. That's done over coffee.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any way to apologize to someone without doing it face to face, unless you're gonna, write a novel to them, which I guess you could, but not on Twitter.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's hard because in an elected position, you get beat up a lot.
Yeah.
And I have been. Twitter wasn't as big as it is now when I was in office 4 years ago.
Right.
Nearly 5 years ago. I mean, it was big, but it's a whole different animal now. Mm-hmm. And what's allowable, what's not allowable, some of those things have shifted. The way that threads work on Twitter and all those types of things is totally different than it used to be. And So, and of course, the political climate's different than it used to be too. I mean, it's been the last 5 years has been incredibly volatile when it comes to politics on the left and the right.
Yeah.
And so it's no matter where you're on the spectrum, it's changed. And so I think dealing with the negativity, first of all, like I said, I apologize if I'm able to, and then after that, I'll explain why I made the decision I made.
Sure.
Because it's more important that you understand that I care about the fact that you've been hurt than it is about you knowing why I did what I did.
Right.
And sometimes they go together, but yeah, no, most of all, I just try not to get drawn into anything that's going to be too bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult for sure, but I'm sure you see it. I mean, you see the way that social media can go, and trying to stay out of it's always the best way to do it.
That's why I'm undefeated.
Yeah, that's right. You are undefeated.
I see the negativity and I know how it makes me feel. However, I can control by my actions on what I reply or how do I intervene and communicate at that point.
That's something that we talk to our kids about. That's something my wife and I talk about is you and I am in charge of my own reaction, right?
Ownership.
No one else gets me to do anything.
Right.
No one can make me come over there and yell at you in your face. That's my decision. I'm in charge of my own actions. That's it. I don't get to control yours.
Correct.
I control mine.
Yep.
That's it. And at that point, if I decide to get involved in something that's going to cause problems, it's on me. And then I'm the one that gets to respond to it and deal with it and live with it as long as it takes to get past it.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully that's something my kids learn, especially in the age they're growing up in, where they're going to have the opportunity to make a fool of themselves faster than I was able to.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Yeah. No,
we could talk about that all day long.
Oh yeah, we could. Have you ever had anyone, let's say on social media, try to bait you into a debate, whether it's just about anything?
Absolutely, yeah. And so usually I just don't respond.
Yeah.
And then they'll holler at me for a day or two, and then
move on.
But I try. Usually, what I just give them my phone number. Is like, if you want to have this conversation, we can do this in person. Excuse me. Yeah, we can do this in person. There's no way for either of us to come out of this thing feeling better doing it on the internet.
Yeah, because you can't hear the voice.
There's no way.
Yeah.
And so I could give you every fact. You're not going to believe it because you're not acting rational right now. And if I get involved in this, I'm not going to be acting rational either. And so let's have a rational conversation. And then, I mean, I may leave. You may change my mind. But you're not going to change my mind on the internet.
Yeah, that's
it's just not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to happen because if you've baited me in, I'm already past the point of where I'm going to be rational.
Yeah.
For me anyway. Other people may be different, but for me, if you're able to bait me in, you've already got into the heart of why I'm upset probably, or why you're upset, and now it's emotional. And no one can be rational when they're being emotional. It's just not possible.
Yeah. What is a couple of things in life taught you how to be more rational, how to control your emotions?
Oh, so, I mean, my faith. So I'm a Christian, which I'm sure you're aware of watching me on Twitter. I try to wear it on my sleeve. I've tattooed it on my body. Like it's, I've got to remind myself, because ultimately I'm accountable to Christ, which I talked about. Like I'm accountable to man, so man and women. I'm accountable to the human race. I'm ultimately accountable to Christ. And so, and I've failed him often, and I'm doing my best to not, but I can't do it outside of the strength that he gives me. But so I have to learn how to be rational, and I learn a lot of being rational from the Word about how to conduct myself around people, how to conduct myself within my day-to-day life, and so in 1 Corinthians it talks about no matter whatever I do, whether I eat or drink, do it to the glory of God. So I think it's, my daughter will correct me if I get it wrong, but I think it's 1 Corinthians 10:31. So no matter whatever I do, whether I eat or drink, I do it to the glory of God. And so that means that I'll make a big deal out of God. So to glorify means to make heavy. So to make a big deal out of God, no matter whatever I do. So whether I'm a chief, or if I'm like when I was 18 years old, making less than $18,000 a year, getting married, and at Oklahoma Baptist University, moving tables and chairs around buildings, like glorifying God by doing that.
Right.
So So to me, being rational comes down to understanding that if I have to stay grounded in what I believe.
Yeah.
And if I do that, then most things don't make me angry.
Yeah.
And emotion is what causes you to be irrational.
Yeah.
And so, so my faith for sure holds me. But I think outside of just watching other people react helps a lot.
Oh yeah.
So regardless of their faith, Christians do terrible things all the time, make terrible decisions all the time. I do sometimes, but watching other people react irrationally is probably, it's kind of like, what do they say? You know, you babysit your brother's kids, so you'll have it's a good birth control, right? Or you babysit your cousin's kids, or your nieces and nephews. It's good birth control. Obviously, I didn't do that enough because I've got 4 kids, but
Yeah.
It's watching other people make fools out of themselves
Right.
on Twitter and on Facebook
Yeah.
is really what grounds me in
Yeah.
being rational, because I don't want to do that. Like, very rarely, I mean, I called out someone that was a candidate running for office a few weeks ago, and I didn't want to do that, but I weighed the pros and cons before I did it. Like, it wasn't like a, dadgummit, I'm so angry at you for making this decision that I'm going to do it right this second. It was thought about it for a while before I did it.
Yeah.
I thought, what is the positive that can come out of me doing this? And there was a positive.
What was the positive?
So it's actually Stephanie Bice, who just won the nomination, and I supported her.
Yeah.
And she had made some comments about tribal sovereignty on a televised debate, and I think it was a baited answer. I don't think she would have given that answer had she been given more time to think about it. It was like one of those 2-minute questions that you have 10 seconds to answer, you know. And so I don't put all the weight on her, but the answer was a bad answer. It was not a good answer, and if she truly believed that, then I felt like she had misrepresented who she was to me. And so, and I talked to a lot of people about supporting her in the primary, and so I felt a responsibility to call out that response publicly and engage with her to get the answer that I thought she really believed.
Yeah.
Or to at least have the conversation to explain to her why her answer wasn't adequate for the district that she's representing.
Yeah.
Or wanting to represent. And so we ended up talking the next morning for a half hour or more, and you know, it was a great conversation.
Yeah.
And she ended up correcting her answer. That's not what I meant. This is what I really believe. And so it was a positive. And I don't think I changed her mind. I think I just explained to her how what she said could be heard for something she didn't think she was saying. Right? And so, while she felt it was misconstrued, I said, you have to correct it, or it's going to continue to be taken as you said it.
Yeah.
And so,
that's true.
To her credit, she called me. The other candidate never did. I called them both out, not just her. And so, because they both answered relatively the same way. And to her credit, she, as a good public servant, she heard someone she wanted to represent reached out to her, and she took care of it.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, and I think that social media can be used that way.
Yeah.
Ultimately, maybe I should have just called her. Maybe. But because I had done so much publicly to help her,
right,
and maybe not so much publicly in which I'm a face of the campaign,
right,
but I'm a face of the campaign to the people I talk to.
Absolutely right.
I felt publicly doing it was the right way to do it. She probably would have appreciated how I just called her. But I mean, it's just important to use it for the right reasons, and it allowed for her to publicly correct it.
Yeah,
and
it did.
It really forced her hand to. And so, I mean, I do have a little bit of politics left in me, probably, but but I love Stephanie. I think she's a good person.
Yeah,
and
we met her too.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw the picture. Yeah. So hopefully her and Kendra have a Congresswoman Horn have a spirited general election. I think it will be good. I'm excited to see both the campaigns. Hope it's positive. I can't stand negative campaigns. I'll never be a part of one. Even if, I mean, I don't think there's any way you could force me to go negative.
Yeah.
On my own.
Might as well just not even do it.
Yeah, I would rather not run or get beat than go negative.
Right.
I saw one of the most negative races I've ever been a part of. I was supporting Shane Jett in this primary against Senator Sharp, and the independent expenditures, which candidates can't be a part of legally, went extremely negative on Senator Sharp. Extremely negative. Some of the funniest mail pieces I've ever seen. They called him Count Taxula and made him look like a vampire. Lots of funny things like that. If he would have won, Shane ended up winning
Yeah.
the primary in the runoff. But if he would have won, I would have framed him afterwards. Like if he, I mean, if I was him, I would have framed. They were so outlandish but funny.
Yeah.
And then there were some extremely negative ones towards him that weren't funny. But to me, that wasn't Shane going negative. That was an independent expenditure that Shane couldn't have anything to do with. Well, I mean, Ron's campaign ended up going extremely negative out of his own campaign did. He did. And he even printed Shane's address on a mail piece.
Oh.
So he's got 3 little girls at home. And to me, that's unforgivable.
Yeah.
So negative campaigning, I mean, if you want to go negative, that's on you. But there's certain things that are off limits, and that's always family.
Yeah.
You don't ever go after my family.
True.
If you want to go after me and decisions I've made, you can go after me and decisions I made. But you don't go after my family.
Right.
And ultimately, that's what that other candidate ended up doing, and really made me frustrated and made me not want to deal with politics, like just for a couple hours anyway. So, so but no, I think there's a lot to learn about watching people and how they interact in politics. But
that's cool.
But yeah,
I'm glad you brought up the fact that you engaged Stephanie Bice on social media, because I felt, because I actually was.
Yeah, thanks for drawing me back in there. I don't know where I was going to end up.
Oh no. But what I wanted to say is we engage our listeners, our viewers on Twitter as well.
Right.
So I have a question box.
All right.
That they have our Twitter friends have DM'd us on questions we should ask the guest. It doesn't matter who the guest is.
Right. These are good questions.
Yeah, these are good questions. So we're gonna let you answer a couple.
Okay. Do I have any pet peeves? Yes. So, one of my pet peeves.
That's a good question. It's funny.
I don't like it when people honk their horns.
Like car horns?
At other people.
Okay.
So my wife and I, when we have arguments, they're usually over really important things. Like I try not to argue with my wife about petty things. I'll just let her be right before I argue with her about something that's petty.
Okay.
So if someone like gets too close to her, she'll honk. And I will get into the biggest arguments with her about there's no reason to honk, then we're going to hit you. And if I'm at a busy intersection in New York City, someone honks, I know they're honking at me. Like there's no telling. I mean, I'm not doing anything. Why are you honking your horn? I hate it when people honk.
Okay.
And it shouldn't bother me. I should have so much joy that doesn't bother me, but that is a pet peeve.
Okay.
It's a funny one, but that's
pretty interesting.
But it makes me so angry.
Okay, that's good.
All right, there we go. They got me fired up.
Oh man.
Ask that question. All right. What is your favorite weekend activity? So Olivia and I are foodies.
Okay.
We love trying all kinds of food, going all sorts of places. And so I love it when we get a few days to ourselves.
Yeah.
And even when we take the kids with us, it's great. But going and trying different food.
Yeah.
We have some favorite restaurants that we go back to, but it's kind of hard now with all the stuff shut down.
Yep.
That was maybe the hardest part about the real shutdown that happened was not being able to take her out to try new food. And so we're actually our anniversary is tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right.
10 years.
Yep.
Which is exciting, and I thank God for that. And we're going to do the plug for my buddy Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell. He's also the Secretary of Tourism. They came out with the Route 66 passport, and so it's about this big, and you can get it for free at travelok.gov, maybe.
Yeah. Or is it we'll put it out there?
You order it, and it comes to your house in just a couple days, and it looks like a little passport, but you go get it stamped on different places on Route 66. So we're going to do that this weekend. That's how we're going to celebrate our anniversary.
That's awesome.
Driving around. We have someone watching the kids Friday night and Saturday night. And we're just going to drive up and down 66, getting stuff stamped.
Fantastic.
Trying good food. I think we're going to social distance, watch a concert, listen to a concert at the Round Barn.
Okay.
I think they're having one this weekend, so we're going to stop by for a little bit and listen to that. Stop by Pops, pick up a pop, and just fun stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's my favorite thing to do is hang out with my wife and my kids. But
Very
we're
cool.
foodies, so going to the restaurant specifically, we enjoy that. But
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you wish people would ask you? There's 2 questions that no one ever asks, but you wish someone would just I wish someone would ask me this question.
What's your favorite book?
What is your favorite book?
Okay, so always start with I love the Bible, so we'll set that one there.
Perfect.
But my favorite book ever is probably. It's funny I asked the question and I don't really have a great answer on it because I have so many as I say it. But currently, my favorite book I've read recently is called Radical, and David Platt wrote it. And he's a pastor. He was down in Alabama. Then he was also the president of the International Mission Board, and now he's the pastor at McLean in Washington D.C. But and it's about like living your life in a radical way for God. So Radical is currently my favorite book, but I love to read. That's why no one ever asked me that. What's your favorite? What are you reading now, Justin?
Yeah,
that's my favorite question, but rarely do I get asked that.
That's interesting. Part of my question I wanted to ask you is, if you could take a scene from a movie or your favorite book, what would your season of life be like right now with that book?
I'd be overseas. I'd be doing mission work right now. If I get out of that book, I would be overseas, somewhere where there's unreached people with the gospel, and just allowing God to use me that way.
That's awesome.
That's what if I could take any scene from any book, that's what I'd be right now.
Man, see, I was going to allude to that, but
there you go.
There you go.
Got into it, yeah.
Man, what's another question you wish people would ask you?
How about this one? Why are you a Christian? No one asks that question. And I don't know if it's because I don't put myself in enough positions to get asked that question, or if it's just because we live in America and that's not really something you ask. You don't talk about religion and you don't talk about politics, right?
Well, that's what they say.
That's what I'm saying.
However, it's like
you avoid those conversations usually. In most of my life, I have avoided those conversations. And so, but yeah, that's probably the other question I wish people would ask me. And of course, the answer to that one is that, and I wear, and the tattoo, I'm not wearing a shirt that's going to allow me to do it, I don't think, but I have a tattoo, and it's the cross, and it's Galatians 2:20, and it's, I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Wow. And so, to me, that's always my answer. If I get asked that question, is that I have a God who loved me, gave himself for me, reconciled me with my Creator, and now I have a future. Man. So that's my answer to that question that I asked myself.
Wow. You seem like you're a deep, critical thinker. So my next question, here we go.
Don't do it.
I'm going.
It's not math, is it?
No.
Okay.
We already touched on that, but I threw independence in my head to factor off the miscalculation.
Thank you. Thank you.
But
yeah, I've embarrassed myself more than once. In fact, so I don't have my degree.
Okay.
I don't have a bachelor's.
Okay.
I don't have an associate's. I don't have anything. I have like 122 hours of school. That has amounted to nothing. But I do have a lot of hours. But you know what, in class, I have 9 hours left for my bachelor's. You want to know what one of those 3 classes is? Math. I have never completed a math course. I became a youth pastor in 2009.
Yeah.
And I dropped out of the math course I was taking on Wednesday nights because I had to be at church to be with the youth.
Yeah.
So I never took it. Maybe one day.
Okay, well then this might help answer my next question. So then the question is, what do you think you regret not doing in the next 10 years if you don't do it? What do you regret?
Going overseas. If I don't go overseas, maybe not long-term mission work, but if I don't do that, if I don't go overseas this year, I'll be disappointed. That only gives me 4 months, so I probably won't do it this year. But maybe I will.
Yeah.
But I think that we're supposed to go throughout to the ends of the earth and make disciples, and I really do think that is a command that I have not been obedient to. I've gone overseas. Olivia went to both Burma and Thailand. And I've been to Thailand to do mission work and learned a lot about it there. But anyway, no, I feel like I'll be really disappointed if I don't do that.
Okay.
And then I think that I'll be really disappointed if I don't invest in my kids' lives. And it's one thing, I never doubted that my father and my mother loved me.
Right.
The example I try to give my children is it's God it's your mom, and then it's you guys. Because, and that's the example I want to leave my kids. Now, I don't want them to think they're not important to me and that they're number 3, and but because of that, because my kids may not get to have kids.
Right.
But if they get married, I don't want their marriage being dependent upon having a child.
Yeah.
And I want them to be focused on their spouse. And I've got 2 boys, 2 girls, and I want them to be Christ-centered, and I want them to love their spouse more than anything else on this planet. And your children see that.
Yeah.
You're loving your kids by doing that.
Yeah.
So I love my kids more than anything. I mean, it's a struggle that I have. I put my kids first all the time, above Christ, above my wife, and it's hard not to. But I think that if I don't invest in my children, and that means putting Christ first, putting my wife second, if I don't do that well, then I will regret that.
Yeah.
And I see families and marriages that fall apart because of children, and children who aren't loved because they're not even put anywhere near the top 3.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's that would be probably my biggest regret would be not loving my children in a way that they understand who Christ is to me and who my wife is to me.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. It's similar to Vince Lombardi's approach when he was a football coach.
Okay, what is his approach?
He talked about God first, and I believe it was family, football.
Yeah.
I think it was in that order.
Yeah. Lombardi, and I'm sure I've seen that quote. One of my favorite figures. And I know so little about him. But what you do hear about him, it's like what you want people to think about you when you're gone. Like, gosh, that guy was truthful with me.
Yeah.
He was hard on me, but he wanted what was best for me.
Absolutely.
Because if not, he would have put football first.
Yeah. Yeah.
If he didn't care about his players and his other coaches,
right,
it wouldn't have been God and family before football.
That's exactly right.
There's a lot of coaches you see that do put football first.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. You watch a lot of football?
I used to.
Not anymore.
No. So 2 years ago, I got rid of our TV.
Okay.
Everything, and I watched OU every Saturday, and I watched Dallas every Sunday.
Yeah.
And that was my day.
Yeah.
And I realized I'm giving up 8 hours a weekend that I could be spending with my wife and kids.
Yeah.
To football. And so now I'll say I don't pay attention. I pay attention to it, but it's not. But I lived and breathed it, man. If OU lost, that would ruin my weekend and sometimes my week.
Yeah,
I don't want that anymore. I'm not saying that it's a sin to do that, but it was becoming a sin for me. It really was. It was becoming an idol for me, or became one for me. And my father-in-law probably said it best. And I'm not angry at him for saying this to me, but it's what prompted me to give it up. Was that, if people ask about Justin, what's the first thing they're going to say if they ask who Justin is? They're going to say he's an OU football fan. That's not what I want people to say about me first. I want them to say he loves Jesus. He loves his family. He works his tail end off for people. I want them to say those things about me. I don't want them to say he loves OU football.
Man, I guess you just answered one of my questions. What do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered?
That's it.
Well, there you go.
I mean, I want the people to know I love Jesus first.
Yeah.
And there's a really hard part about that is that, Jesus asks you to hate everything but him. And that doesn't necessarily mean I go hate my wife and my children.
Right.
But in comparison to him, to my love I have for Christ, that I got to hate everything else.
Yeah.
And that made giving up football really easy. And it wasn't because it was interfering with my faith in Christ. It may have canceled out my witness a few times because of how much I cared about football. But it's crazy though. I mean, I see how much football meant to me.
Yeah.
And we're probably way over the time we're supposed to spend together.
No, you're good. You're good.
But when yesterday, my son showed up and he was carrying a football. We don't have footballs in the house, not because I don't want a football in the house, but we just don't have any right now.
Yeah.
And he carried a football in from his aunt's house, and he just set it there in front of me. It was like he made a point of me knowing he was carrying a football around because he remembers how my 7-year-old son remembers how important football was to me. That he still brings footballs to me like it's something I used to probably carry one around the house. I probably wasn't even the most extreme fan ever.
Yeah.
But no, I lived and breathed it.
Okay.
Man, I remember my biggest moment ever was meeting Switzer.
Oh,
that was my biggest.
King himself.
That was my biggest moment ever for a long time.
Yeah.
In fact, if you asked me 4 years ago, my defining moment, it may have been when I met Switzer.
Well, I'm glad I met you 4 years later.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
No, I'm really thankful, Chief, that obviously I followed you for a long time, actually, on Twitter.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I thought we followed each other because I remember listening to your first one you did with, not your first one you did, but the one you did with Pinnell. I
Yeah.
remember listening to that when you had him on
Mm-hmm.
right after you released it, and so you've done a good job, and I like what you're doing. First of all, I like talking to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So I like getting to know people.
Yeah.
And allowing that to be a platform in which you can do that publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good, I mean, our conversation's been good.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
It's been a good conversation.
Genuine, authentic, love
Right.
it.
So you've probably said this one before, though. But before we go, tell me your defining moment.
Well, I've had many defining moments, and I talked about one of them on my first podcast about when I was super fat when I was younger. I
remember that one.
But let's fast forward to this year.
Okay.
Right when the pandemic was setting in, the first couple weeks, I feel like most people in the world could agree that there was a lot of fear. And I had this fear driven into me a little bit, and so did my wife. And then I went to my parents' house, who escaped from a communist country. And so I talked to them about it. And my mom and dad were just looking at me. My mom's in Vietnamese. She's like, well, there's a lot of people starving on that boat, and they're dying of diseases. And then my dad chimes in and says, we were also dodging bullets.
Yeah.
So I let that sink in.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you asking that question, because from that point forward, it's like, man, I'm not going to be defeated.
Well, and I noticed a change in the way you even use Twitter from that point forward. And I didn't even know that happened.
Really?
Yeah, you got a lot more aggressive in your push on being undefeated and making the most of what we have here, and we live in a place that I would argue that everybody wishes their country was as free as ours.
100%.
Everybody probably wishes their country was as free as ours.
Yeah.
And maybe not everyone wants to leave their country. And I'm not saying they do.
Right.
But people have fled, like your parents did, to get to this country. And this country isn't always right.
Correct.
We're not always right.
Yep.
And we're oftentimes not right. But we are free from so many types of torment that other countries have. And you know what the truth is? We probably won't always be.
Right.
So it's I think it's important to take advantage of that when we can, and utilize the freedoms that we have.
Yeah.
We get to choose what jobs we have. We get to choose what kind of education we get. And not everybody has the same circumstances. Yeah. But everyone has the same opportunity to dig themselves out of that. And we also are all free to serve and be helpful to those that need our help.
That's right.
And so, one last thing. So one of my friends told me, because of Jesus, I am free to say yes, and I'm free to say no. I'm free to say, no, I will not do that, and I'm free to say, yes, I will. And so I think it's important to remember that we are free to say, yes, we will help those that need our help.
Right.
And I think that's the most important thing we can do at any time. But right now, especially when there's people that are afraid, people are always dying.
Yeah.
This is not a new thing.
Yeah.
But this fear is new. This is a new fear. And so I think it's important to encourage people and to take advantage of opportunities you have to be encouraging.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
But anyway, we're free to help. I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, because my parents got rescued by the United States military.
Yeah.
And so they were on that boat for 33 days, obviously.
Wow. Yeah.
And one of the key points of when I was talking to my parents about this whole shutdown is my dad made the comment also, is like, no one in the United States, a citizen that was born here, has ever lost their country's flag.
Yeah.
And they lost their South Vietnamese Republic flag. It had to be brought down because it was no longer recognized because of the communism and the communists taking over. So, I mean, if that doesn't send a shockwave or some chills into your body, then man, it's...
Yeah, we have to appreciate what we have.
Yep, 100%.
And doesn't mean we can't be better.
Correct. You're right.
We have something that a lot of places don't have.
Yeah.
And we won't always have it. And so you do what you can with it. You take advantage of it. You aid it. You help it. Whatever it is that you need to do at that moment, you do it because you don't have it forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Last question for you.
Okay.
Well, I got two more. What are you most proud of?
My faith in Christ.
Love it.
That's it, man. I could give you so many answers of things I used to be proud of. But no, my faith in Christ is what I'm most proud of. And it's hard sometimes because I want to say I'm really, really proud of my kids and everything they do, but I'm really proud of what Christ has done for me, the way He changed my heart when He decided to do that, and I was 7.
Wow.
When I came to faith, and I don't know that I'm fully aware of what that looked like until much later in life, but I was 7, and I vividly remember it, and so I'm kind of walking through with my kids there right now. My oldest two, at the same time, came to me last year, and me and Olivia, and said they wanted to talk about it. I'm slow playing them, but they're starting to understand what that might look like for them, and we're doing a lot of things differently than our parents did, raising us and things like that. But in the faith, proud of my faith in Christ, and proud of what He's done for me, and happy to be free to be able to say that. Yeah.
Brilliant. That was beautiful, actually. Well done.
What else you got for me? I'll answer them all.
Oh, yeah. How do our listeners and viewers get in touch with you? No cell number, obviously.
Oh, sure. So you can find me on Twitter, and right now I'm Justin_F_Wood is what I am on Twitter. Right now. I change it every once in a while just for fun.
Okay.
I like to throw people off. I change my profile pic a lot too to throw people off.
Okay.
One of my buddies, Adam, he's a consultant. He's actually a city councilor in the village now too. Why do you change your picture so much? I said, I like to keep you on your toes.
That's funny.
Keep you on your toes, but. So it's Justin_F_Wood.
Yeah.
I'm easy to get a hold of. You can message me on there, and that's probably the best place to find me. But yeah,
and you always interact with people. So
I try to.
It's great.
Yeah, I try to. And if I can help you, I guess I love to kind of help, volunteer,
we appreciate
or do whatever I can to be helpful. But yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Last question then.
Okay.
Chief, look in the camera. Do you approve this podcast?
I approve this podcast.
Now's your chance to be political. My name is
Justin Wood, and I approve this podcast.
My name is Wong Lam, and I definitely approve this podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That was good. It was fun.
A lot of fun.
Did you enjoy it?